Everyone, and welcome to the Agentic Quality Podcast. I'm your host, Tatyana Arbouzova. We like to bring you quality leaders from different industries. And today we're bringing you Dave Sommer, who spent 25 years working in quality, and he spent a lot of time in HR ERP space. So I would love to talk to him today about the quality challenges in that industry and how he's going through the AI adoption in his organization. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you for having me. Truly appreciate it.
Dave, tell us more about what you do at Korn Ferry.
Yeah, so I am the Vice President of Quality Engineering at Korn Ferry. For those that aren't familiar, Korn Ferry is an executive recruiting and talent consulting firm primarily, but we also have a suite of talent products that support those businesses and are also available independent from those businesses.
And what attracted you to work in quality leadership and quality engineering?
I kind of came at quality from a non-traditional sense. My background's actually in agricultural business.
Wow.
And I ended up getting an internship in college that was a QA internship, not knowing it was a QA internship. So it was a company looking for someone to test software, but also knew what a cow was and knew what corn was. So I kind of fell into QA. And then, started my career on the HR tech side, think traditional HR benefits, hiring, terminations, career development, applicants, tracking, timesheets, all that good stuff. And really enjoyed the process piece, the standardization piece, figuring out the best ways to provide value. And that's what led me to leadership. Started in small teams, and then throughout my career I've worked in different either HR space or ERP spaces, along with AWS, and now find myself back working with talent and HR software again, which is super exciting.
Amazing journey. And aren't most of us join quality by accident, right? Like I think 80 or 90% of people fell into it. But then the ones who stay the longest, like 25 years, I've spent 25 years in quality. We're really passionate about it, right? You got to be passionate to stay in quality and dealing with all of the challenges of quality engineering. So tell us more about the challenges of the HR tech, quality, doing testing, for HR tech and ERP systems.
Yeah, I think specifically to HR, right, is you don't only have the personal data of the employees, but you can also have personal data of applicants. And then when you look at HR tech holistically, you'll always hear folks talk about, oh, we build commercial grade software or we build enterprise grade software, right? But when it comes to HR tech and talent tech as well as what we're doing at Korn Ferry and even ERP to a point, you got to get to the point where you are building consumer grade technology, right? So it's super easy to use, super easy to understand, right? For not just applicants, but every role. You could have employees doing self-service, you could have managers, you can have back office. So you have a wide range of roles using the applications. And how do you build and test a product that is as simple as to use as possible, right?
Yeah, that's a good challenge to make it work for so many different audience. And I can think of the HR product where we used to apply for jobs and it was so painful. You might know that product that I don't want to name, where like we had to jump through hoops to even apply somewhere. It's a challenge, right?
I think everybody is very familiar with applying for a job, uploading your resume, and then wondering why you have to fill out all the fields that were just on your resume, right? Yeah, and then ERP is similar to HR, right? Where you have a very broad use case from a user perspective, but also from a location and workspace perspective, right? So you could have anybody from a back office accounting person using the software to somebody down on the shop floor using a tablet, right? To somebody in a warehouse using a handheld device. So it's how do you test and build fit for purpose software either that works across all of those, or are you building individual ones and testing individual ones?
And do you also have because of the privacy, do you have issues like generating the realistic data for testing this, or is
Data
that a
is a
problem?
challenge, right? Because you can't just wholesale say, I'm going to go take an extract of production data,
Right.
right? So what it is you are either trying to simulate, where AI is very handy for that these days, right? It can spin up a lot of data for you. So you're either taking extracts and working to either anonymize the data, right? Or you're looking to take an extract of that data, analyze it, and try to build your own. But as everybody can imagine, there's a lot of sort of guidelines and rules around who can see the data to even look at it to analyze it in the first place. So that's where you
Yeah.
get to work with your friends in compliance and legal and privacy as well.
Yeah. So it's similar to finance and healthcare, basically, where they
Correct.
have a
Yeah.
very similar data issues. All right. Well, let's talk about the AI adoption. I know that you've been on this journey for a while. So can you share us how you started on that and what were some challenges that you faced?
Yeah, I think for us, Korn Ferry's very forward looking when it comes to AI. We have AI products today. We have an AI institute, so we have it in a lot of places. So we had very forward looking leadership groups that basically ask the question, how are we going to use AI? Right? Where are we going to use it? How can we scale it? So for us in QA, right, it was the natural things, generating test cases, generating test automation, right? Like those were the obvious ones. The teams that I lead is a mix of manual and automated, right? So it's how do you build something that is usable by all of the team, right? So you don't need an automation engineer to do it. You got to build something that a manual tester should be able to take a test case and generate automation from and be able to easily understand what the output. Does it actually make sense? Does it provide value to test? Right. So for us, the journey has been a couple of different pieces. The more obvious ones, like we talked about, is how do you generate test automation? Right. What does that look like? So the first thing was, we are a set of multiple products, multiple QA teams. So how do you standardize, right? So what is deciding on what your standardization of what automation frameworks you're going to even use in the first place before you even start trying to generate it, right? So once you agree on that, then it becomes what's the tool of choice and what framework are you going to build out that can be shared across the groups, right? So for us, it's been a journey of identifying the tools. Really, what is the biggest value, the biggest bang for buck, right? The obvious one, generating more automation coverage and the ability to quickly generate test cases. Those are the two big ones for us. We've landed on using Cursor and Claude Code. We do have pockets of Copilot as well, but the bulk of it has been how do we build something that's reusable and scalable across the groups?
Right. And works for both manual testers and the automation engineers. So did you end up building anything on top of the LLM tools, or do you just use the combination of LLMs and some rules and guidelines on how to use
Yeah,
that?
so we actually use Cursor to build out an automation framework that will generate. We're BDD Cucumber based, so to build out those tests, those automation scripts for us. That is something that can be used across of our products, right? So technology agnostic, which is very nice. What we're looking towards now is how do we, lack of a better term, productize it, right? So anybody across the groups can use it and they can just, like I said, feed it a test case. But a lot of that is also the work up front related to things like skills, right? So take the example of, applicant tracking. We've all seen when we apply for a job, you'll go in and it'll ask you, hey, are you from any of this list of countries, right? Embargoed countries. So you can create a skill and feed it to the machine, if you will, that says, hey, anytime you're generating a test case, generating test automation related to a candidate, here's your list of embargoed countries. So every time you just have that one place that you need to update, you can feed that as a skill, as a set of instructions, right? Another example that we're looking at and working with our design team on is everybody has a set of design principles, right? Create a skill that says anytime you generate a page should look like this. So our test cases and our automation should match that, right? It's basically a style guide, if you will, that you can just reuse over and over again. So if the style changes, you update it in a single place, and you ask AI to update your automation, so you don't have to go through hundreds of scripts fishing for those things that you need to go manually change, which is
So
super
basically
helpful.
standardizing some skills and making sure that everyone is using the same standards, the same
Correct.
bar for evaluating the product and designing it. So that's great. So let's take a step back a little bit. So before you jumped into creating this framework and everything and all and adapting it, right? So were there any barriers for you to convince the team or to educate the team and up level them to be able to use these tools?
I think the interesting thing I found is, and had to kind of level set, is as we're going on this journey to figure out where we're going to land, it's not a competition, right? We're all working towards the same goal. So if your pilot or your initiative isn't necessarily where we land, that's not a bad thing, right? You're contributing to the overall goal. So that was one thing very early in the process, because a lot of people have a lot of ideas, right? So setting from a culture perspective that here's our ultimate end goal, here's what we're trying to solve, contribute to it as much as you can. That is fantastic. As far as the tooling, the tools are so good. Even myself, right, coming from a non-traditional place, I've built numerous apps that I use every day that I've shared with other parts of the business, right? The tools are that strong that people can literally just pick up and run with them. But then leads us back to let's have some standards, let's have those skills, so everybody's not doing it differently.
So basically, you didn't have a problem of people resisting the AI adoption. I think you had an opposite problem. Everyone's trying to solve it in some way or the other. I'm hearing two sides. So I'm hearing a lot of we had to convince people, they were against it for many reasons and all of that. So it's great to hear that for you, it was the opposite and everyone was trying to solve it in many different ways. So that's great. And so another question I have is around building it in-house or buying the tools, right? So how did you go about that? How did you evaluate that? Hey, we want to build a framework in-house. Did you look around for the tools on the market, or how did you approach that?
I think for me, from that build buy perspective, right, is I don't, and even at this point, right, we are probably we still need to define where we're at and where we're going, right? So that's why we started with build. We already had the licenses purchased. Let's start there. Let's figure out how we're going to use these tools, what's going to provide the most value. I absolutely believe that once we have these things up and humming, there are things out in the market that we will buy and look to buy, right, to help supplement us, right? There's just so many tools out there that when we were looking at evaluating, it was more of getting the house ready to go, right? So things like test case management, for example, right? When you look at automating, are you just going to go automate everything, or are you going to automate based on priority and value? One of the ways you do that, right, as we all know, is got a bunch of manual tests. How many manual tests do I run every release? How long does it take to manually run them? That's a metric you can use to say, if I automate this set of 10 things over here, it's going to save me 2 weeks of time, versus if I automate these 500 things over here, it maybe saves me an hour of time, right? So for us, it was, since we're still on this pilot journey, right, and figuring out the best ways to use it, we started with build.
So you wanted, I think, to experiment with the tools yourself to understand the challenges, to understand the benefits, and figure out what your end goal is before you really go and explore what's out there in the market. And things are changing so fast in the market as well, is that in 6 months, you have a completely different landscape of tooling right now. So another thing that I was fascinated when I was talking to you previously is that you also use AI in automating other processes in quality and otherwise. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, that's been a big one for me personally that I use almost every day, and it can be anything from analyzing sets of Jira tickets, for example, right? I want to look through and help my friends in support to see hotspots, right? I want to look at the breakdown of, hey, do I have teams and products that maybe have higher escape defect rates, right? What can I do as a leader to supplement those teams? Is it a resource issue? It is a training issue, right? So for me, it's been a lot of using the data that we have and having AI quickly provide insight, right? And that's something as simple as building a tool on Cursor to drag and drop a CSV file, give me a nice readout, let me generate an executive view PDF report, right? I mean, it is as simple as that, right? And it's so looking at it from an analytics perspective, that's how I'm using it. I also see it as there's lots of opportunities. We've actually built we haven't rolled it out yet, but we have basically a chatbot front end where somebody outside of development can choose to run a test automation suite. Right? So say you're a delivery person or you're a consultant or you're a support person, you can fire up this user-friendly, hey, for product XYZ, I want to run some tests. Okay, here's the drop-down, pick it, right? And it's very user-friendly, straightforward. They don't have to have the framework. They they hit the drop-down, they click a button, it runs a test on their environment, and it gives them a report. So I think it's using AI to surface data in a digestible way for the rest of the business is incredibly important.
Yeah. Yeah, this is very empowering, I think, for us as a quality leaders, because I find that, for example, for me to understand the customer support or customer success data, a lot of times I cannot go through all of these tickets. I have to depend on the customer success leader or customer support leader. But now with the AI, I can just, like you, look at the data and use that to my advantage to improve the quality and improve the processes. So that's amazing that you're using it in that way. You use it to empower yourself to make better decisions across organization. I think that's amazing. And you also mentioned that now you're empowering other disciplines to run the test cases, right? That they don't have to depend on quality team to do that. And how did this change your relationship with the development teams? Do you see them doing anything differently now?
I think so. We've, along with the work that's going on in QA specifically, we also have larger scale projects and what I would call pilots running across the entire SDLC, right? From everything from what is it we want to build, requirements, design, engineering, and QA, right? With our friends in engineering, again, the tools are so powerful, right? That we've all heard in the quality in our careers for so long that for engineering to generate unit tests and to generate integration tests increases their estimates, takes time away, right? Now you can just say, hey, even if the code already exists, you can at least point it to get a starting point and say, generate unit tests for me, right? What does this look like? So I think they see the value of that shifting left, right? Because they can have those unit tests and those integration tests run on a pull, and they can see a bug right away and they can fix it versus waiting a week for QA to test it and have to turn it around. So I think that's one where they also, when you look at the holistic group of doing it, we can also generate test cases much faster. So you can get vetting from the other parts of the organization, whether it's engineering, product, or design, right? Like they again don't have to wait on QA after we get their requirements for the same amount of time they've had to historically. So it compresses the whole process, which is nice because you can get feedback earlier.
Yeah. So that makes me question kind of two things, right? And different development teams are doing this differently, like generating their test automation and unit tests and whatnot, right? Is the coverage that they're generating, like, do you find that useful? Does that actually save you time as a quality organization and you have to write less tests? So that's one question, right? And then the second question, if they are writing really good tests, right, then what are we here to do? Like, does this really erases what we're doing?
I think there's still, when it comes to things like unit tests and integration tests, it catches the easy, the obvious stuff earlier, right? So there's definitely power in that. It also helps with just things like peer reviews, right? Do unit tests and integration tests exist in a peer review, right? Like you can use AI to generate those things for you. But I will say, in building things myself, you definitely have to vet those unit tests and integration tests, right? You ask them to generate it, Cursor gives you 40% coverage and half of it fails on the first pass, right? So it's not a silver bullet. I think QA, if we're catching things earlier, it just frees us up for more things, right? It frees us up for more of looking at usability, accessibility, end-to-end testing, right? Those sorts of things. What are we doing from localization, translation perspective? So it frees us up from a lot of the mundane and the things that get caught early, right? Like, hey, the data's not saving, right? Like we should be able to move past those things and we can focus more on what is the user actually doing, right? And again, always providing the value.
Yeah, I really like that perspective because I feel like we're always so short on time as a quality organization that we don't have enough time to do everything, right? And so usability and the customer experience is something that always doesn't get enough attention from us because we're focusing just fixing plain bugs, right? So I think it's a great direction that we're shifting left with the developers developing a lot of their own tests, and now we can focus on a lot of other stuff. So that brings me to the question is like, how do you see the role of the quality engineer changing with AI adoption and with shifting left? Like, what do you think they will be doing in a few years?
I think we're still directly entrenched and involved in things like test cases, right? How are these things supposed to work? Because I don't think we'll be at a point anytime soon where you can just blindly hand AI a set of requirements and trust everything that comes out the other end, right? So being a subject matter expert matters, right? Totally matters, whether it be the test cases, the requirements, generating the automation, right? Because I think we all know also we don't want to just blindly trust the automation that's being generated, right? Until you've worked with it for a while, right? And I think that's one as people go through and go on their own journey and create pilots and try to figure out how to use these tools, automate stuff, ask the tools to automate stuff you already have automated. See if they line up, see if they match, right? Have it create a set of test cases that you already have. Spend time validating up front that you're going to get reliable results in what you expect before you just point it at a repo, and say, let it rip. And then you're sitting there with 10,000 test automation scripts that you don't really know what they do, right?
So you're saying we'll still have to babysit it a little bit until it matures?
I think, as QA people as a whole, right? Like so much of our value is in the analytical mind that we bring, the risk reduction that we bring, the subject matter experts of the product. How does a user use those sorts of things, right? AI is not going to replace those things anytime soon, if ever. So I think our value, it actually frees us up to do more of the things that we do really well, right? So it's far beyond the babysitting. I think we'll still have to do some of that for sure, but it frees us up to do what we all like to do too, right? Those are the enjoyable things.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's true. But what do you think is the new skills that the quality engineers should be investing in now with this AI transformation?
I think understanding how the tools work, right? You still want to be able to do that. Having a base understanding of automation, right? Like you don't have to be an expert that you're building out frameworks on your own in a couple hours, but understand the outputs, right? Understand what it's giving you. Becoming that industry subject matter expert, right? If you focus on a specific industry, land there. I think a lot of it also is, again, becoming that partner across the business, right? What does how you convey risk, how you convey value across the entire business, because looking at quality holistically, right? Versus just I'm testing product, I find bug, I enter bug, I test fix, I move on, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes more of our career of being that analytical piece that is providing, risk analysis, user experience, subject matter experts.
Yeah, I agree with this 100%. I do believe that the quality leaders should be business leaders in one way or the other, because we have to connect the quality decisions with the business decisions if we want to make an impact or influence anyone. And I always thought that the quality engineering leaders should be sitting somewhere between business and engineering and not just under engineering, like I will be rooting for that my whole life. We do not belong under engineering. We're connecting too many dots across the organization. So agree with you there. So what is your advice then for the, quality leaders who are getting into the AI adoption and who are going through the transformation in their teams?
Yeah, I think shut out the noise, and your journey is your own journey, right? Understand what you're trying to accomplish, what is going to provide the most value to your organization at the end of the day, right? And that can be for your direct quality organization, the development organization, the business as a whole, right? But it is taking a step back and looking before you just start diving in building stuff. What problem am I actually trying to solve? Am I trying to reduce the amount of time spent testing? Do I need more visibility into what's coming in and out? Do I need to have better ways to communicate out risk and what's going on within the SDLC? So starting there and understanding what goals you're trying to accomplish and which ones are going to provide the most value. Naturally, everybody's going to gravitate towards test coverage, generating test cases, right? That's the easy answer, and that one for the most people probably is where you land. But make sure there may be steps you need to do before that, right? Again, making sure you have standards, I think, is a big one too. Making sure you have a standard of how your groups write test cases.
Yeah.
Do you have a standard automation framework? If not, how do you get to one, right? So you can scale, so you can standardize your things, so you're not chasing one-offs all the time.
Yeah, standardization is very important. It saves us a lot of time across organization, especially if you have a big team, not reinventing the wheel. So a question about your AI adoption story. So during the last, few years that you were experimenting with AI, what surprised you the most? Like, what were the biggest wins and the biggest, mistakes or losses that you encountered?
I think the biggest win, honestly, and I put myself in this group too, right, is there's a lot of folks out there that are manual testers that feel like they can't keep up, right? That how am I going to skill up while I still have to do my job day in and day out, right? These tools will let you do stuff you literally thought you could never do, right? As a manual tester, right? Don't be afraid of them. Get in on them, right? I think that's the biggest. Like, I am surprised every time I fire them up that it's actually that easy, right? I think that's one thing. Interesting challenge is, honestly, once you start giving licenses, trying to sort of, and this doesn't just go for quality, but just as a whole with every organization I've seen, is like, how are you putting governance around who's doing what with it? Right? You're burning through tokens, and it's like, what do you got to show for it, right? At the end of the day, so I think that is one that is very much an ongoing challenge of, we've given these licenses. Here are the expectations of what we're trying to accomplish across the entire organization, right? And actually seeing the output of people burning thousands of tokens in a week.
So we have to show the output for it, and I was spending more than we're getting.
Exactly. So it's sort of tracking and quantitatively measuring what the output of the spend is.
Yeah, right? I'm actually very curious how organizations are going to handle it in the near future, because it's a big problem nowadays of how much money we spend on these tokens, right? And how do you get people to be even aware that, like, hey, don't use this prompt, you can just Google it or something.
Yep. Yeah.
And don't use this model because it's the most expensive one for the simple questions. And yeah, I think that's such an interesting challenge right now. I want to finish with the closing questions. Is there any message that you want our listeners to remember after today's session? So what would that be?
Yeah, I think the big one is everybody's journey is different, right? Don't get hung up on posts on LinkedIn. Don't get hung up on articles you read. It's everybody's journey is different, especially if you're in a long-standing enterprise organization, right? There's a vast difference between the slow-moving beast of enterprise versus something like a startup. So your journey is your own. Manual folks, don't be afraid of the tools. They are awesome. And always fall back on every decision you make is what is the value of what I'm doing, right? What value does this thing provide?
Great. And Dave, if people want to connect with you or continue the conversation, where can they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is obviously the easiest one. That is the best place to get a hold of me.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us and sharing your AI adoption story. It's amazing to see how organizations are going through transformation. And thanks for sharing the challenges of the HR products with us. It's always interesting to learn about the different industries. So thank you for being with us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
We'll see you guys next time.